Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you're a returning listener, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, we're really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. In our continuing parade of outstanding guests, we are super excited for today's guest to come on. Michelle Moffitt is a licensed therapist in Washington State. She is going to talk about some experiences that she had early in her life that were difficult for her to process and extricate herself from. She's going to talk about how she did that. She's going to talk about some of the things she works with clients on in her business. And remember, this is a licensed therapist, classically trained, tons of education, tons of experience. So we've got like a subject matter expert on a ton of stuff that we talk about on the podcast. And we're just very fortunate to have her on. So without further ado, let's bring her onto the channel right now. So, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Super happy to be here and excited for your show.
Yeah. We had a great conversation several weeks ago, and I've really been looking forward to it because you bring a kind of unique set of circumstances in that you have written a book about some really challenging things that happened in your life, in addition to having clinical training and decades of experience in dealing with these issues. So you come at it kind of from a 360-degree view because like the stuff that we're going to talk about, some of it's kind of gnarly, and then you've got all of the training and education around it. So I've been very excited to have you on the show so we can dig into some stuff and maybe you can fix me. Good luck with that. People have been trying for
I'll put you on the couch.
exactly. People have been trying for 53 years. Whatever, maybe we win some kind of an award if you do that. But
Yeah,
if you could just very briefly kind of give broad strokes on who you are and a brief history, then we can jump into more detailed stuff as we get into the conversation.
sure. Currently, I am a psychotherapist. I'm a leadership coach. I work with teams and do a lot of team training of getting people aligned on the same page. Um, and I wrote a book, cracked open over there in the corner. And my book is about memoir meets toolbox, part of my story, and then the how-tos of how did I find myself in there in kind of a cultish situation and how did I get myself out? So,
Yep. So just so everyone knows, we will have links to Michelle's coaching business. We'll have links to Michelle's speaking and a link to Michelle's book in the show notes. So you won't have to go searching for her. You can just look at the show notes if you want to get in touch with her and talk to her about her services. So always like to be able to do that for our guests. So with that said, let's start there, right? Because you were a younger woman when you kind of went through some pretty hairy stuff as it related to a religion you were involved with and a religion in your life. So if you wouldn't mind kind of talking us through that, that'd be super helpful background.
yeah, I was born and raised in Seattle, very progressive parents, forward thinking. Dad was a big feminist. He would say, why be the flight attendant when you could be the pilot? And I wanted to be a flight attendant because it sounded adventurous and you got to wear a cute uniform. But needless to say, he was very supportive of women and women having equal roles. I had a couple of traumas happen during college, and college is one of those times where you're trying to find yourself. You're away from home for the first time, and you're really looking for belonging, and we need belonging to feel safe. And so these couple of traumas sent me kind of on my own, and my body and my brain told me to find safety. And so I took a really hard right turn, and safety appeared, at least told me that it could be found in the conservative church. So I found myself in the conservative church because they had what I would call communities of certainty, where they had answers to all the questions. Whether or not they made sense is another story. And so I landed myself in there. I married a pastor, and was a pastor's wife in this system for 25 years.
Mm. So 25 years, that's you start a family, you've got roots, you've got routines, like those things, weigh on you more and more, and extricating yourself from difficult situations becomes harder and harder. I'm fortunate. My wife and I have been together for 33 years. We jokingly say to each other, there's too much water under the bridge. There's no way out at this point. Neither of us wants out, so it's a joke. But Yeah, I don't want to, I don't want to sound like I'm holding my wife captive in the basement or anything, or her me. But yeah, so that right, that creates a challenging situation. But you had some pretty significant things that were going on in your life and in your marriage that you needed to make changes, did you not?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, the system says divorce is wrong. That was said at our wedding. Take it out of your vocabulary. It's not allowed. And so, you find yourself in these places with this kind of God card, and you don't want to upset God, whoever this God that they've created is. And so in the system I was a part of, there was a term called male headship. And so men have a direct line to God. They're in charge of making decisions. They're in charge of leading, and women report to the man. And there was one at one point. I'm asking for help outside of the system, and they're saying it sounds very hierarchical is the way you're making your decisions. Like I would say I need to go ask my husband, or I need to go ask these male leaders if this is okay for me, instead of being able to make choices for myself.
Mm.
Um, and so much of it is just based on fear and power. I I don't know if those people actually have any faith or spirituality or religion. It's a really great place for narcissists to kind of hang out in, in this kind of patriarchal system.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I have three sons, and they're all older and off the payroll now. But when they were younger, I coached a lot of sports. And at one point, I think I was like running our little league, or because I did that for a while, and somebody asked about doing either background checks or screening on coaches and umpires. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Why would we not?
Hmm.
And somebody was like, well, it's a barrier to entry and some people might not want to do it. I'm like, time out. Uh, this is people are entrusting us with their kids for like hours at a time. We take up a significant portion of their life during the season. And if there is a scumbag in our midst, we should know it. Like,
Hmm.
and that's a hard thing to do sometimes. So anyone that pushes back against background checks or training or classes or whatever, that was always a real red flag for me. What's your objection? I wound up I got recruited to coach a basketball. There was no basketball team. My youngest son went to a Catholic school for a little while, and Mother Superior there wanted to have a basketball team there, but she wanted me to coach it. Like that was her deal. I'll do the basketball team if Joe coaches it. And I was already coaching a couple of other things, and I said, "Look, I'm flattered, really appreciate it, but like I got a wife, I got a family, I got a job. There's only so much I can do." But she was persistent. And so 2 years in, she wore me down. And she said, "I'm really sorry, but I need you to go through all of like the background checks and the fingerprinting." And I said, "Say no more, no problem whatsoever." So to me, that's always kind of a litmus test. If you get
Hmm.
pushback when you ask questions about legitimate things, if there's any pushback or not a direct answer, that should be like a warning, big
Hmm.
flashlight above your head, like, hey,
Hmm.
something's wrong here. Something's
Yeah.
off. Oh,
Yeah. It's interesting when I was getting my graduate degree and taking a psychopathology class, the professor, and we're going through the diagnostic manual for that, the DSM-5, and the professor was saying, we got to narcissistic personality disorder, and he said, that a lot of pastors actually sit in this place. They get to create whatever they want. They get a stage, they can say what they want, they get to pick the music, and there's very little accountability around it. So, that I was like, the lights are going. I was like, that's really interesting. Something's going on here. And in order to be in this, we were church planters, or my ex-husband was a church planter. So it means he's starting a church, which is
hmm.
people that are Catholic, or they're like, what is that? It's like starting a business.
So like you're building a congregation from
We're
scratch.
building a congregation. Yeah. And in order to do that in this particular denomination we were a part of, we had to go through a week-long assessment. And I have to be part of the assessment, even though I'm not going to get a paycheck and I'm not going to have a role on paper that says, I can put this on my resume. And so we go to this assessment. It's a week long. There's probably 8 or so other couples there. And again, in the system, maybe there could be a single guy be a pastor, but not really. Like,
Hmm.
and it's just anyway. And so we're in this thing and they're watching, there's assessors there and they're watching how we interact with each other, how we start conversations. We're given hypothetical situations and figuring out who's leading, how to solve problems. And then we go through a battery of psychological testing with a psychologist and they're asking questions. One of the guys who was one of the assessors has written a book called When Narcissism Comes to Church. And on a podcast, he said it was something crazy like 90% of the pastors that they evaluated for that had some form of narcissism, whether it was full blown out narcissistic personality disorder or not. But they can be movers and shakers. They can ask for money. They can deliver a talk, right? And so why would they not put them in that position, but then not think about the results that come out of that?
Yeah. So, in your role dutiful wife? Was that the role you were expected to fill in that scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, whatever I needed to do to make my husband look good, make this church thing happen, that's what I would do. Yeah, our home was open. If anybody wanted to use it, I had to give up my space to let people have parties in my house. We had multiple times during the week people would come over for meals, and I was responsible for cooking something fabulous and serving everybody. And the pastor never got up to help,
Mm.
So the kids would go upstairs and have to, fend for themselves because it was so important that these people at the dinner table were going to, it was life or death, right? Heaven or hell. And so their job was
Yep.
so important that, I had to make it happen. And, the truth is, Joe, I bought into it. I was zealous about what I believed and what I was doing.
Well, so that was actually going to be my next question was I'm trying to understand the timing because you've got all this education, you've built a really successful business for yourself. Were
Mhm.
you going through your education and having these things described as you were going through them in your personal life, or what was the
Mhm.
timing of that?
I went and got my graduate degree in my 40s, mostly because it was going to be beneficial to the church. So everything that you do in these systems is in a bubble. And so if you want to hire a plumber, you're going to hire a Christian plumber. If you want to
Mm.
hire, a therapist, you're going to have somebody who aligns with the values of the church. And so I was going to get my master's in counseling, and my eyes were starting to open up a little bit about what was going on. And, it was kind of one of those like, surely not me.
Mm.
No, right?
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because like we try to point out themes that we see. We talk about themes on our podcast over and over again because there's episodes that I do that's just me, talking about my experiences and sharing those things with
Mhm.
listeners. And one of the things we talk about is taking action and responsibility and auditing your environment because your environment has such a huge impact on how you live your life. And I think a lot of
Mhm.
us don't even understand that. So I think you're a really good example of it because anyone can talk to you for 30 seconds and tell how intelligent you are. They can tell how put together you are. Yet here you are going through literally training for stuff you're experiencing. And it's really difficult for you to push back on that and fight
Mhm.
your way out of it. I think it's really important for our listeners to understand all of that's going on at the same time. That's not a commentary on Michelle in any way, shape, or form. It just goes to show you how the world works and how human nature works and how your brain works. So when you're around something long enough, it starts to appear normal, even if it's not normal.
Mhm.
But if you
Mhm.
see it all the time, then you start thinking, hey, this is normal. And you kind of need
Mhm.
someone from the outside to go, what the fuck? That is not normal, not
And
acceptable, right?
oh yeah, I had I had a couple. I call them my personal board of directors that I
Hmm.
gathered when I started to need to make some changes in my life and I needed different voices. I needed people that were in totally different worlds from mine that could speak into it. And I would come to them and say, they said I took vows to them and they have authority over me. And they would say, you took vows to a toxic system because I was so confused. I'm like, I did take vows to them. What does that mean? What is like, so I need to do whatever they're saying because I did that. And if I don't obey them, I'm breaking my vow. And that goes against my word and my character and all these things. And they were like, you took vows to a toxic system, And I'm
Yeah.
like, Okay, okay. So what do I do with that? But it was just really so much mind fucking, right? Of just like
Yeah,
what?
I think that's the perfect term because that's exactly those people know it's wrong. They know what
Oh
they're
yeah,
doing is wrong. They know it's slimy, it's intentional, and they do
yeah.
it anyways. Like it's so bad when people
Hmm.
do that kind of shit. And it's unfortunate in your case, it was done in the name of religion. So me personally, I'm not religious at all.
Yeah.
That's just me. I'm very respectful of religion. And I think when it's properly a part of someone's life, it can add a lot of value to
Hmm.
someone's life. So I'm not anti-religion in any way, shape, or form, even though it's not something that's in my life. With that said, it's hard to think of another organization that has been responsible for more bad and evil things in the world than religion when you look at it through the course of human history. You know,
Yeah.
how many wars have been waged in the name of a crusade or a cause or a belief?
Hmm.
And it just over and over again. But then you take it from those broad things down to people's individual lives. And,
Hmm.
like you're sharing with us what you went through, which we really appreciate your willingness to come on and talk about it so you can help educate our listeners on what to look for when you see it, what to do about it. We'll get to that here. But yeah, it's easier to do when you've got this higher, you can exalt a higher power, right? So
Hmm.
on a much lower level, I do that all the time in negotiation. If I want to buy time in a negotiation, even if there's not a third party involved, I'll invoke a third party. So if someone says I need an answer, I'll just say I got to talk to my attorney. I might
Yeah.
have an attorney, I might not have an attorney, but or I need my accountant to look at the numbers, and oh, they're
Hmm.
not available, right? And so you can buy time. It's the same exact thing that they do in religion. This isn't me telling you to do this. God told me
Hmm.
that you need to do this. And
Hmm.
that carries weight with smart people because they question, hey,
Hmm.
I stood in front of all these people. I put on a really pretty dress and I invited everybody and I said till death do us part. Like,
Hmm.
what am I doing? Is this wrong? Is this me? Am I just quitting or like
Hmm.
you had
I'm
it
not
exactly.
trying hard enough, or
Yeah.
I need to pray more or be more submissive or, whatever. Love my husband
Well,
better.
yeah, exactly. I watched a video of you basically, I don't know if you were reading or reciting an excerpt from your book. And I thought that was a really powerful moment. Would you mind kind of just going through that briefly here? Because I thought it was super powerful when I watched it.
Oh, the webinar that I did recently.
No, no, sorry. You were talking about driving to a meeting with elders, and
Oh,
were
okay.
you were prepared to talk about some things that you thought you'd get help on?
Sure, sure. So the kind of the one of the big aha moments for me, or big moments of change, was I had my husband was one of the leaders in the system, and there's no HR, and um, and also it's so incestuous, intertwined, because you're supposed to be able to go to your church for help. It's supposed to be a community that stands by you and supports you, and when you have difficulties and all these things. And I was finding myself having nowhere to go because my husband was the head of the organization, and I needed help from him. And so there's not anywhere to report. Also, in these kind of organizations, you kind of go through the court of the church before you would go to a legal court, like a federal court or a state court. So you're having to kind of say, here's charges against this person, and they go through their rigmarole of what that looks like, and they talk about it in their meetings, and you can get released or not, or they bring charges against you. So you're in a court also. So I know how the system works, and I'm finally, things are so bad. I just need some help. My husband was very mentally ill and doing really atrocious things, and I had nowhere to go. So I thought I'm going to reach out to these people I've known for 10 years who have been my friends, and we've vacationed together and celebrated holidays together. I'm going to reach out and ask for help, and I'm going to give them some material to read on trauma and how it plays itself out in our lives. And if they can help my husband, maybe there's something we can work with here. And so at this point, in my story that the leaders have said you need to come and share with us what's going on and what has been happening in your marriage for the last 25 years. So I write a 3-page document and I head over to this meeting across town and I'm 5'9", so I'm tall, and I put on my high heel shoes so I'll be taller and think I can be strong in this meeting. And
Position
I
of power,
arrive,
right? Make yourself feel
right.
powerful. Yeah.
Trying to be powerful here, even though these are people that I know very well. And I'm escorted to the back of someone's house. I find the seat closest to the door in case I need to make a quick exit. And there's one woman in the room and 8 men.
Mm.
And I take out this 3-page document that talks about the abuse that I've been under and things that have been happening in my family for years, and asking for a lifeline. Can you please help me with this? Can you give him help? Can you make him admit what he's done? Can we work on this? And I look up, tears streaming down my face as I've been reading this, and they say, "We don't believe you. You need to repent." And so at this point, I get up, I grab my handbag and clunk out the door in my high shoes. And this, I'm like, okay, I see where this is going. So repentance in the Christian term of it, or the Greek way, is metanoia, which means to turn around, change your mind. And so I was like, they're asking me to turn around and they're asking me to sit down and shut up. And
Mm.
so I was like, okay, I can't do that. That's not what's going to happen. So I can't look to them for help. And so it just became more of me becoming more and more isolated, them continue to come after me. I got letters and emails from people literally in a different country at times, handwritten front and back, of like, you need to turn around, you need to repent, you're going the wrong way, you're wrecking all this stuff. And nobody admitting um, what my husband had been doing. And so just, kept my lifeline outside of the church. I had very few people that I was even allowed to be in contact with, mostly from my husband because he was very jealous. And they just kept walking me through the process. Okay, so here, this thing is coming up. They're requiring that you go to marriage counseling. You don't have to say anything when you go, because I was like, I am not going to marriage counseling and have the therapist report to the church what our session was about. It's none of their
Mm.
business, but they were allowing this to happen. I'd never signed a release of information, and so the therapist is liable for that too. But I was like, okay, I'll go, but I'm just not going to say anything. And the therapist was really chatty, and so I never had an option to say anything
Uh,
anyways.
that seems like a bad play for a therapist. I think
Right.
that's a listening job, not a talking job, is it not?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So so here you are. You've gone through all these experiences. You've reached out for help from the people closest to you, and they've told you we don't believe you. And
Mhm.
instead of giving you help, they essentially put together a concerted effort to try to silence you and browbeat you back into submission.
Mhm.
Um, what's your situation at this point? Do you have a job? Do you have kids? Like personally, where are you at in life?
Yeah, it was I have 5 kids. At this point, 2 of them were in college, 3 were still home. I was starting a private practice in counseling, and I was starting a group practice as well. And like, again, very incestuous. So much of it was all tied together. So the group practice was actually meeting in the basement of one of the churches.
Mm.
And so there was so much that was at risk for my colleagues, the employees that I had that were other counselors. If I said anything, we could lose our site. And so I just went about my days and hid and was like, okay, I'm going to try to avoid these people as much as possible because there's too much at risk. My housing was caught up in the church. One of the elders owned the house, and so we had this really cheap rent. But we were, if who knows what I was going to happen if I say we need, I'm leaving or any of this stuff, and I also couldn't leave because I would lose my kids. So,
Yeah, that's you thank you for laying that out because that's kind of what I wanted to draw out for the listeners is think about what Michelle has at risk in this point in her life. Like literally everything in her world is tied to this organization and the people that she's reached out to for help that are now attacking her and trying to but gaslight her into sticking around and just keeping status quo going.
Yeah.
Um, so like it took a lot of guts to do what Michelle did. And I call that out for our listeners because you can do it too. You're not in a worse situation than the one that she found herself in that we're talking about right now. So I like to call those things out. So you're here. There had to come a breaking point where you said, "Hey, if I'm going to make a break for it, it's got to be now." What can you describe what that was?
Hmm. Um, he ended up losing his job, and so our housing was ending, and my kids were in private Christian schools that they were getting scholarships based on his profession and his job, and so they were going to need to get transferred to new schools, and my mom was sick at the same time in Seattle, so I was like, I would really love if we can have a fresh start to go back to Seattle, and at this point, also in my home, I would sleep with a lock on my door, and he would sleep in another room. There was really strict boundaries around the house because he had been stalking me, and um, and I still, looking back, I'm thinking, this is just so crazy. Why didn't I call the police? Why didn't
Mm,
I get a restraining order? And the church handles everything. They want to do everything in-house. And so if they're saying, oh, he's fine, he's safe, then I somehow am gaslit in that place of going, okay, I guess I got to do this. And I had a safety plan. I had a Rubbermaid full of changes of clothes. When you're walking around your house going, what do I put in a Rubbermaid to take in case something happens? Like, what are you going to take what is that, a Coke bottle up there on your shelf, Joe? Right? Like, which thing is the most important? And
yeah.
again, I'm like, I don't know how, it's like, how did I get in this situation? This is so crazy. Like, this is so absurd from anything I've ever known. And so I had a safety plan and all these things. And I was just like, I want to move home. I want to go back to Seattle. I want a fresh start. We can go to counseling out there. We'll get work out there. The kids will get a fresh start. Um, and things didn't change. He still didn't admit anything that he had done that was wrong or abusive. I came out and settled with the kids. He fished and meandered his way across the U.S. Again, because I'm responsible for everything. And um, and so I called him while he was away, and I just said, "Hey, it's been really peaceful in the house, and I'd really like to not have you move in, and we'll go to counseling, and we'll get a fresh start starting over that way." And so for the listeners, you cannot record a phone call, but you can put him on speakerphone and have a witness in the room. And so he was threatening on the phone, and so I told him he would have a restraining order and be met at the door with the police if that's the way he wanted to handle it. So just a tidbit there.
Yeah, good
And
tip.
again, and again, you're going, how did I get in this situation, right? I'm a smart person.
Right.
This is crazy. Also, for listeners, one way you can help people is giving them gift cards, just, disposable money like that, because sometimes they don't have their own money. There's no way to get funds to do anything. So that's another tip. But so we went to marriage counseling, and within the month of marriage counseling, he was seeing somebody else. So then it was done.
Oh yeah. So that's a win. So you had talked about in that, or you said a couple times you were questioning yourself. How did you deal with that self-doubt? And I have a little bit of personal experience with this because without getting too far into the weeds, my mom's been going through a crazy situation related to a probate dispute that from her second marriage. And there's been some real nefarious behavior by people that she was really close to for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And she has questioned herself, how did I see it? What's wrong with me? Why did I let
Mm-hmm.
myself get in this situation? Et cetera, et cetera. So I'm kind of asking because I'd like some more ways to handle that with her because, the ways I've learned selling groceries for 30 years, I'm at the end of my skills and abilities as it
Mm-hmm.
relates to those things. But how did you manage that internally?
Yeah, gosh, it was a lot of work, but possible, and we're wired for that. Our bodies are designed to be resilient, to be able to be rewired. Um, I walked a lot, so there's sort of therapy called EMDR, and it's trauma therapy, but it's cross body. And somehow we find ourselves in cross body movement that we start repairing trauma. And so my walking was a cross body movement. I could, I would tell myself the same mantras over and over, right? Like just, things about being strong, and I can make a decision for myself. And one of the things I think happened is I got gut washed, is what I call it. Like I stopped trusting my intuition. So I would believe what you told me. And it's just I don't know how to describe it except that they have an answer for everything.
Mm,
If they tell you the answer, that's the answer. And so there's this whole world out here of information, and it all funnels through this box. And then it comes out sideways and you're like, that's the answer. And so when you're in the system, you're like, of course that's the answer.
mm,
But it could be something that's totally wrong or something that doesn't even have an answer. And so all of this, and they put it here and you're like, I trust them. Okay, that's what it is. So learning to trust my intuition again was really hard, but I started small, or listening to my intuition and going, what is it I actually want to eat for dinner? I mean, like
mm.
nachos every night, of course, right?
It's always Taco Tuesday.
It always is Taco Tuesday, right? But being able to start making small decisions for myself. What is it that I really want to wear? Like this, I've been told that I'm supposed to dress this way, or I'm told that I can't be angry, or I've been told that I can't X, Y, and Z. And so being able to kind of sit with small decisions and being able to go, okay, now I'm recognizing and I'm more comfortable making decisions for myself. Um, I don't know if that's helpful for you, but
Yeah, and so I'm trying to get my mom to see a therapist on a regular basis because, like, I understand why she's struggling with what she's struggling with, but I think she needs someone to help her work through it and kind of develop some of those. For what it's worth, she watches our podcast every day as well, because we do give a lot of these tips to our
Mhm,
listeners. Now, for me, it's interesting, and I think we talked about this a little bit when we spoke, but like I'm one of the least touchy-feely people on the face of the earth. However, I love knowledge. Like I want to learn as much as I can. I
mhm,
might agree with it, I might not agree with it, but I want the information.
mhm,
And so I love being exposed to different things like that. And we just did a podcast last week that said one of the things you need to learn to do is question things you've accepted as true your entire
mhm,
life.
mhm,
And I just think it's good practice. You may come to the exact same conclusion that you came to before, but at least now you can feel good about it.
mhm.
And a lot of us just accept as gospel, like in
Mhm.
your case, the actual gospel, um,
Right.
but we accept things because people say them with conviction, or they say
Mhm.
them from a place of authority, or they say them backed by a higher power, or whatever the case may be. I think it's unhealthy to just accept that stuff without questioning it. If you
Mhm.
question it and run it through your own personal filter and then find out, okay, well, I agree with that now. Good on you. That's great.
Yeah.
But at least you can have the peace of mind that you did a gut check on it and you can feel good about it. And I would
Yeah.
also add that if you have any doubt, there's a reason for it. You should
Yes.
not dismiss that doubt. You should
Yep.
follow up on that doubt. There's a reason it's there. You might not know what it is, but it's there.
Hmm.
So that's enough of
Hmm.
me talking. You can comment on what I just
No,
said.
yeah, I would say like as far as authority, even there's this thing called the Bible, and a lot of people will say we take it, every word is real, it's God breathed, and but they're removing the context in which it was written in. What is the ancient Near East tradition for this particular thing, or um, and what's this translation and who was on the translation committee? I would say most Bible translations are only done by men. You'll find only men on translation committees. Well, then why wouldn't they, not surprising that there's this thing called male headship then, right? Why would they
Sure.
invite a woman to the table
Right.
if they want to have this particular agenda, right? There's a verse in Proverbs, and it says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. And I always, this is the doubt you're talking about. I always was like, it doesn't really make any sense. So, like, I'm training up my child in good ways and ways I think they should behave in the world. And it's promising me that they won't depart from those ways. But we know kids do. We
Hmm.
know, like, if I'm training him up to be a good Christian and my kid decides they're an atheist, so what happened? Did I not train him up right, or were they just a bad egg? And it's kind of like that doesn't make any sense. And then to come to find out later, a better translation of that is train up a child in the way that they are, and when they're old, they won't depart from that, right? And so it's basically you need to learn your child
Yep.
and you need to learn their gift set and help them figure out who they are. But there's no power in that. There's no power
Yeah.
over, which this power over system keeps wanting to have, right? So,
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And so, it's funny because my wife and I, it was important to us that we raised kids that thought for themselves and did what they wanted and followed what was important to them. And I'll be damned if they didn't grow up and do just that. And now I can't tell them anything. Now, now they're independent thinkers and they call
right,
me out and like, you're full of shit, dad. We don't believe you on this or
right.
whatever. And
Yeah.
like, if you do it, I think if you do it right, that's what you wind up with. You wind up with independent. We see our kids all the time. Like we have a very close relationship with our kids. It's not a
Mhm.
bad thing in any way, shape, or form, but they're their own men, and we're
Mhm.
proud of that they're their own
Mhm.
men. So like it resonates with me when you talk about it
Mhm.
like that. So, it's interesting. You've talked a lot about this system being patriarchal and run entirely by men. Super interesting because I absolutely think uh, men fuck up a lot of stuff. I'm not, I've done a lot of episodes on traditional masculinity and why it's good. But I
Mhm.
always caveat those episodes that in traditional masculinity in its purest form, you are looking to lead and raise everybody up with you. And
Mhm.
anytime that masculinity involves subjugating people, it involves subordinating people, it involves denigrating people, that's not at all
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Right.
And that's just another thing. There's nothing wrong with being a man. There's nothing wrong with being masculine, but there's something really wrong, regardless of your gender. If you've got to do it at somebody else's expense, something's wrong.
Mhm.
Something's
Yeah.
off if that's the
Hmm.
approach. You don't build
Right.
yourself up by tearing other people down or pushing them down.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, there's a lot of men out there that really thrive. Like it comes from a place of insecurity and self doubt. They're actually pretty small and pretty insecure internally. So they
Hmm.
project externally and try to make themselves look strong at the expense of other people. So
Hmm.
just something for our listeners to understand. I couldn't agree more with what Michelle's talking about for what it's worth. And that might shock you because I've done a lot of stuff on why masculinity is good and it's necessary and all those
Yeah.
things. But what she's describing has nothing to do with masculinity. It has to do with being dicks,
This is
just
true. I mean,
plain
I
and
love
simple.
men. Don't get me wrong. I have a wonderful partner and three
Yeah.
sons and a dad. And I'm big proponent of men in the world. So
But you've got
yeah.
to look out for these systems. She's given you a really good kind of diagram of like how you can look at this and ask yourself these questions
Mhm.
so that you don't wind up in a bad spot because it's easy to
Mhm.
get into a bad spot because people can be pretty convincing. One of
Mhm.
my favorite quotes was Andrew Carnegie, and in his 60s, he said, "As I get older, I don't listen at all to what people say. I just watch what they do." And
Mm.
I love that quote from him because it's so true. A lot of people can say a lot of stuff, but
Mhm.
we the business I run, we operate grocery stores on the south and west sides of Chicago, and in the neighborhoods we operate in, we're the only stores because most of the other stores have picked up stakes and left. Like Walmart closed all their stores in Chicago, and Walmart's a great organization. They run fabulous grocery stores, but they couldn't make it work in those neighborhoods, so they left. And so when we get criticized, I always think about who, and that's a big thing in Chicago. They like to criticize stuff. That's just how the culture is, and I'm fine with it. That it is what it is. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But I always think about who it is that's criticizing us, and I can tell you, I rarely make global statements, but I'll make this one. I never get criticized by someone that's doing more than I am, than someone that's trying harder than I am. I'm getting criticized by people that are sitting on the sidelines lobbing shit onto the court while I'm playing defense or while I'm
Mhm.
trying to win the game. And I would venture to guess you saw the same thing in these systems. These were people that were sitting on high and not out doing the work that you were doing. Like you talked about going back to get your degree to help the church. You're hosting parties to help the church. You're playing the role of dutiful wife to help the church. You're raising your children under the edicts of the church. And what are they
Mhm.
doing to help? They're trying to control you, right?
Well, and I think a lot of these organizations also, um, if we think of nonprofit or well, the government, whatever, also in those spaces of caring for people that are in these, what do they call them, grocery deserts, right? Or and it's like, okay, we're going to open a food bank, or we're going to, provide meals for kids on weekends that are in the free and reduced lunch, which also is, we don't have to get into how big these problems are, really. But these churches want the accolades for doing that. So instead of joining a local food bank and volunteering at the local food bank, they'll start their own because then there's an agenda that I can do a bait and switch the people who come to the food bank and they might join the church then. Or I
Mm,
can show how great I am because we have all these social services instead of hey, if we join together, we actually have a bigger bang for our buck.
yeah. Yeah, totally. So, all right, I'm done opining and dragging us off onto your story. Super interesting. We're just at the part where you've extricated yourself from a really tough situation. So, you're building your business, you've moved back home, you've made a successful break from your ex-husband. What happens next in your world? Where do you go from there?
I wake up every day. I met with this woman when I first moved back to Seattle, and she had a similar story, and she's in wealth management now and is killing it. And I said, "How did you do it? How did you get out of that? You had no resources, no money, you had kids at home." And she said, "I got out of bed every day." And so, there's not, I wish there was a magic switch to say everything changed for me and my belief systems changed really easily and I found all this freedom. But it's a long process to rewire your brain when you've been in systems like this. And I still have to work on it. My problem with my kids is I'll look like I'm being controlling, and I probably am. And they're all adults now, so I'm really working on this. But I am always coming from a place of needing to protect them. And as most parents do, anyways, but it was extra. It was a lot extra. And so something will kick into me, and I just get lit up and go, I've got to protect my kids. Uh-oh. And then it's like this, nope, unpack it. They're fine. They're adults. They're safe now. They have resources to make good decisions for themselves now.
Mm.
But getting out, it really is just one step at a time and realizing, okay, I need to go to trauma therapy. Okay, I need to, right now I'm working on my sleep because that still is like not a good thing. Um, because the cortisol levels in my body have been so high for so long. And so getting the help you need, getting blood work done, but really a lot of rewiring. Like what is going on for me here? What am I believing? Like you were talking about your guest last week. Um, and how do I rewire my brain? Am I safe? Is this place safe? Are they going to come after me? Do I get to show up on the planet? How do I create community again? Lots of things.
Yep. So you talked about cortisol. We're gonna
Mm.
take advantage of your professional bona fides here. What is cortisol and what does it do to your body?
A very natural, normal chemical to have in your body. It's what gets us through the day. It ramps up when we wake up in the morning if we're on a really good routine. And by the nighttime, it kind of bottoms out when you're sleeping. So it helps you get that deep sleep. Stress, your cortisol levels go up. They wreak havoc. They cause inflammation. They cause belly fat. They, um, and it can cause insomnia, all kinds of mood disorders. And so, really getting cortisol under control is huge. You can get a spit test done that shows you when your cortisol levels are high. You can feel it in your body when it's spiking. You might start having this anxiety attack, and that's cortisol wreaking havoc on you. I like to say everything I do is with kindness. And so even cortisol that has its place, it's meant for good. It's meant to help you get through your day. And so when it does happen and you might have increased cortisol levels or you can feel that anxiety coming on, just be really kind to yourself and go, oh, that just happened. What am I doing and what do I perceive in my environment that is causing this for me? And how do I want to get out of it? And by design, the easiest way for us to get out of kind of a heightened cortisol place is breathing. So when we practice breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth and just focusing on that, it's actually a really good way to get that vagus nerve calmed down for you.
All right, guys. So I promise, Michelle and I did not rehearse any of this at all. You talked about several things we talk about regularly. I talk about breathing, and I think people think I'm nuts. But
Not at
I
all.
went through, yeah, no, I went through college on a baseball scholarship. And as you keep, I had a chance to play professionally. And as you keep moving up and the pressure gets higher, playing in front of more people, you're in a lot of pressure situations, right? And you have to be able to be focused so you can do what you need to do, but you have to be relaxed enough so that your body works the way it's supposed to work. Cause, it's not easy to throw a baseball 90 miles an hour or to hit one that's thrown 90 miles an hour or whatever. And so I was a pitcher, and literally before every pitch I threw, when I got the ball back from the catcher, I would put the ball in my glove, and then I would stand and look at the catcher, and I would do what I call the cleansing breath. I would breathe in through my nose. I would literally do that before every pitch I threw.
Hmm.
And I had no idea it was resetting my nervous system. I just knew it worked for me. But now that I'm older and done a lot of research and talked to, intelligent people like you, I'd stumbled on something that's really good, but I just happened to do it out of trial and error. And so we give a lot of breathing tips in a lot of our podcast episodes. We've talked about box breathing. We've talked about the cleansing breath, breath restriction, and long exhales and those kind of things. How do they impact your body, the breathing? What does it do to your nervous system and your body?
Your autonomic nervous system is connected to breath. And, even if you're just doing the breathing, you can feel all this awesome oxygen going into your brain as you're sitting there. And so, what it does is it triggers, for lack of better words and being simple about it, triggers things in your brain to tell your body to calm down. And so, even at night, if you're having a hard time going to sleep, doing the longer breath out is the one that tells your body that it's time to rest, that you're safe. Um, it's interesting if you've seen a National Geographic show where there's a lion chasing an antelope and the antelope gets away and you watch the antelope and it shakes and then it breathes. And so
Mm,
it's basically its body getting back regulated, saying, I'm safe now. And that's really what that is. I'm safe.
wow, that's awesome. Um, so real quick, I popped into my head. You were talking about working on your sleep. If you're having trouble sleeping, something that's worked for me, and I can't remember where I heard this, but it'll work for me, is picture in your mind a big movie screen and see the number 100 on it and try to count backwards and see the number change. That works for me sometimes. I don't know if you've ever tried that or not, but it works for me sometimes when I'm having
Yeah,
trouble
I've
sleeping.
I've counted backwards from 641. That's my number. More times that I know of. I've even started like drawing it in my mind so it slows down the counting,
Mm,
right? And then breathing with it. Um, but yeah, sleep is hard. And actually just been talking to a sleep coach and a doctor about it and just, taking magnesium at night, taking, chamomile tea, creating really good sleep routine. The phone
yep.
definitely needs to be out of the bedroom. Um, Making sure it's cool, right? And then also, again, with the kindness piece, when I do wake up, I'm trying not to be mad at myself for waking up, but just like, okay, there it is. There it is, Michelle. You're awake again. Just okay. Like, because I don't need to get more worked up about it.
Sure. Yeah, no, that self-talk is terribly important.
Yeah.
So what made you write your book? What was the impetus for you? That's a lot of work. What made you take that on?
It was never on that bucket list of mine. Neither was aerial yoga, and I did that one too, but
We're gonna have to talk about that. Let's do the book first, then we'll
then
talk about
you
aerial
write it
yoga.
in there so you can cross it off, right? I, the original book I wanted to write was I Changed My Mind, My Journey with Repentance. And the idea behind it and this is that we can change our mind. That like I love what you're talking about with your boys, that you teach them to be critical thinkers. And that was the original idea I came up with. I don't have to think like these people anymore. I can change my mind. I changed my mind that I can change my mind.
Hmm.
Because you weren't allowed, it was like this is all gold right here. This is
It's
solid.
revolutionary. It's revolutionary and freeing when you haven't done it for 25 years, right?
Right, right. Yeah. And and I had all the psychology to kind of back up what I wanted to teach and what where I wanted to go. And well, I didn't have it all. Like as I went, it was kind of like the red thread on the solving the crime of like, okay, what
Mm.
is this called when a whole group is acting like narcissists? Oh, impression management systems. Okay, okay. What is this called when, so the discovery in it while I was writing it was really great. And I think I know a lot of people in the system, and I would really love for them to find freedom in getting out. It's also our greater culture is a system that functions like this in a lot of ways. And so just that kind of idea that we can change our mind, how do we do it? How do we move into healthy places as humans? Um, so, and then it was very cathartic for me.
I bet. I was going to ask you if you found it therapeutic writing the book.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It
So
was
one thing
also
I'll call,
terrifying.
yeah, oh, I'm sure. No, I'm sure. Right. Look, well, you're taking a big risk on multiple fronts in your occasion because just writing a book, like doing a podcast, is the same thing,
Yeah.
right? You can put it out there and go, "Hey, am I just yelling into the void? Is anyone even listening to this shit? Like, am
Yeah.
I being judged?" I'm fortunate that I was kind of born without the give a fuck gene, and so even even as a kid, I didn't really care a lot what people thought about me, and that's just gotten more prominent feature of myself as an adult. But you got to be
Yeah.
careful because you can wind up in an echo chamber and have blind spots if you don't listen to criticism because some criticism is very valid, you know? I know like when I have a huge terrible temper and I do a much better job of controlling it now than I ever have in my life, but it still rears its ugly head every once in a while. And simply because I don't express it doesn't mean internally I'm not thinking, I could knock that guy's fucking teeth out right now for just
Hmm.
standing there. It's stupid, but it's true. Like I'm not proud of it, but it's just a statement of fact. So I was putting together, my wife and I had been married less than a year. And I was putting together this table. We bought, it's a funny story, now looking back on it. We bought this table for $300 and I tried to put it on layaway, but I couldn't get any credit because I didn't have a credit score. And so it took me 6 weeks to buy this $300 table. Every time I got a check, I would take $50 in to pay $50 towards the table. And so we get it home and I'm putting it together and I underneath it screw one of the legs on and I stand up and I bump my head on it. And well, I'd been 21 at the time. Yeah, I was 21 at the time. So, of course, my natural instinct, because I was so smart when I was 21, was to stand up and punch the table as hard as I could. And my wife is watching this and she says, jokingly, and she was right. She was, trying to like, hey, don't be an idiot. She said, now, does your head feel better or is your hand just hurt? And I took a step towards her like I was pissed because I was pissed and I took a step towards her. And I've told my wife and my kids, look, if I ever lay a finger on you, you should leave and never, ever come back. Because if someone has it in them, it's always in them. And
Hmm.
there's no excuse. You don't get any strikes when it comes to domestic violence.
Right.
Like if someone lays a hand on you or your kids, get the fuck out, never come
Hmm.
back. Like it's not,
Hmm.
that's a unforgivable sin.
Hmm.
And so I started at her. I didn't go anywhere near her. I didn't grab her. I didn't touch her. I was still 10 feet from her. But she looked at me and said, I don't like it when you scare me when you're like that. And that was like a slap in the face to me, like, oh, shit, that's not a comment you want to hear from your wife. That's a problem.
Hmm.
And that's my problem. I got to do a better job of it had nothing to do with her, but it was manifesting itself. And she felt like it was directed at her. And
Hmm.
so that was a real slap in the face to me that, hey, this is unacceptable. I can't allow this to happen if I want to be in a successful relationship. Like
Hmm.
this is not okay.
Hmm.
So you can't always just not give a fuck is my long-winded point here. There's important people in your life and you should listen to the important people in your life that have your best interest in mind. And my wife has always had my best interest in mind and she's worth listening to every time she talks. So
Hmm.
um so you've written the book. Have you done any readings? Have you done any signings? Have you had any interaction with folks who've read the book? And how has that gone, if so?
Yeah, it's been good. The organization I wrote through is called Manuscripts, so shout out to them. And they take you through the whole process. You have different editors, you have a marketing coach, um, and they create the artwork with you. And everything. And so, and the marketing coach helps you market, but it's still up to you. So, so it was not writing with a big five that does a lot of PR for you. Yeah, but so it's gone really well. I've had a couple of I've been on a lot of podcasts, done a lot of book readings, book signings, little fireside chats. Those are kind of my favorite. Those, the podcast fireside chats and more intimate settings, dinner parties. I've spoken at women's conferences where they've had the book. And so, yeah, it's gone well. I think you don't get rich writing a book if that's what you get business from it. My book has landed, interestingly, in a lot of family law offices, primarily for the domestic violence piece,
Mm.
trying to help the lawyers and judges understand these women are not necessarily stupid or whatever, broken, but they just have, been oppressed for a really long time. And it's also landed in wealth management companies where women don't have they haven't had access to the finances in their family. So it's just kind of more educational for people to see, like, hopefully I'm not, oh, I'm bright and and you can see that I, was put in a place where I didn't have the ability to make decisions and have opportunities. Um, so yeah, that part's been was interesting to me to find it in those places. It's landed itself obviously in the religious trauma categories, and helping some people there. But it's difficult because it's hard to leave, and it's hard when you don't have finances, and it's hard when you don't have a support system if you've been isolated. And so finding the resources in all those ways is really helpful.
Yeah, and you had said you just kind of you have to do it a piece at a time. There is no silver bullet where here it's all better and I'm in a great spot and life is dandy.
Hmm.
Keep getting up and getting after it every day. That's the
Hmm.
takeaway, right?
Yeah, yeah. And again, the kindness piece. Like, if you don't get anything from me, it's the kindness, like kindness to yourself of like, of course this is hard, but I'm still going to move forward. I'm still going to take the next step. And it might not be today. I might not have energy today, but I'll do it tomorrow. You know, it's just that 1%. What's the 1% thing you can do or 2% that you can do today to make a difference?
Yeah, I call it the compound interest of life because it's exactly
Mm,
those little daily habits work exactly like compound interest does in finance. So if you
yeah.
just keep stacking up wins and let those wins compound on themselves, it's
Hmm.
amazing where you can get to over time. And I always tell people, I've been living a get rich slow scheme for 30 years. So that doesn't bother me. Most people don't get rich at all. And so I'm happy to get rich slow. Getting rich quick sounds good, but like
Yeah.
getting rich slow, fine with me. Um, but so you've got the coaching business too. I'd love to talk about the coaching business. What do you focus on in your coaching business?
So, I'm a therapist by trade, training and licensed and clinical counselor. And that limits me to see clients in Washington State because of my licensure. So I do coaching, and a lot of times coaching aligns very much with therapy as well, but it's out of state. And so everything I do is virtual in that realm. And so the difference between therapy and coaching is that a lot of times coaching is very much about like I feel stuck and how do I move forward. Therapy is more meandering in the past. Coaching clients, we do meander in the past because it helps me understand where their belief systems are coming from. But very much about like what's next. Let's keep moving forward. Um, Most of my clients are middle-aged women who are in the middle of change, whether that's wanting a different career, empty nesting, divorce, death, um, taking care of their parents. And so we'll just kind of work through whatever is going on there. I'm an Enneagram coach as well. So I focus on the Enneagram, which is a personality assessment with people, and it's a tool for growth. And then also within the coaching realm, I do workshops. I facilitate workshops and do speaking in companies.
Nice. And I read on your website the Enneagram. I wasn't sure how to pronounce it, so I'm glad you said it
Yeah,
first.
yeah,
Um, can you talk a little bit about the theory and concept behind Enneagram?
yeah, absolutely. The Enneagram is a old. personality assessment. We see a lot of those things like the Myers-Briggs that are used in companies or to understand personality. There's 9 types, and it's based on motivations and not behaviors.
Mm.
And so, what we want to do is we want to be recognizing how we are showing up and how socially, it's a great tool for social engagement. Maybe I'm not recognizing we're different and I can embrace your difference. I'm thinking you need to show up just like I do. So the idea with the behaviors and the motivation, an example is if I'm making cookies, and so that's a behavior. And we're going to walk through each of the 9. So the behaviors making cookies, the ones are the perfectionists, and so they're going to take the back of the Toll House cookies and do it exactly as it is and level off the cookies because they need to make perfect cookies. The
Mm.
twos are the helper, and they're going to make cookies because it makes people happy. They want to help everybody. They're going to understand who's in the room. They're going to make cookies specifically for each person, and that gives them love and acceptance. The threes are the competitive achievers. They're going to go down to Costco and get the biggest platter with the biggest cookies on it because they are competitive and they're going to make the biggest ones. The fours are creatives. Their motivation is to be original. And so they're going to do something from the Great British Baking Show. The fives are the researchers, and they're going to go online and see what's the best cookie and what's the best ingredients and where do we buy that from. And they don't really care if anybody eats their cookies. They're pretty introverted for the most part. The sixes are the loyalists, and they'll notice the cookie jar is half empty, and they're also risk adverse. And so they're going to make sure we never run out of cookies. Sevens are enthusiastic visionaries. They like fun, and so they're going to make cookies with sprinkles on it, and they have a hard time sitting still, so they're going to go do a workout while the cookies are baking and burn the cookies. And the eights are the controllers, and they are not going to make cookies because you told them to make cookies. And those nines are our peacekeepers, and they know that having cookies around makes everybody happy and keeps the peace. They're conflict avoidant. So we're all doing the
Got
same
it.
behavior, but we're
Mm.
showing up with our motivations for doing it is different. And so when you understand that at work, or in a relationship, it really helps you know how to communicate better, deal with conflict better, feedback, all of it.
So do you put people like through a rubric to help them identify if they're which number they are, and then talk with them about how they can set their life up to, like, I don't know if take advantage is the right way to say it, but set their life up for the best chance of success, knowing that that's how they're motivated.
Sure, yeah. There's an assessment that I use, a company that I use to get the assessment from. And yeah, and then we just talk about it. And, we learn best with a mirror. And so when I'm working with a couple, they see it in each other. Um, I'm a 7, so I'm this busybody all the time, and I like to have stuff. And so I was telling my partner, hey, we should go to this venue over here for the summer and go to all these concerts they had. And he's like, okay, we could do that. And it's like, okay, I want to go to this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And he's like, let's just start with one. Right. But I'm gathering. I want all the things all the time. And so it's just that was such an aha moment because I can go, oh, I'm doing that. This is how it plays it out for someone else. This is how they perceive me. Right.
Sure. Yeah, for what it's worth, I already know I'm a 3. I don't need to take the test. But
I don't know. I had a like little aha moment when you were talking about you like knowledge and you
yeah,
gather
but that's
information.
because I want to know more than other people. It's the
Oh, okay. So that's the motivation, right?
it is the motivation. Like, I don't want to be in a situation, and it's probably because at least that particular thing. It's probably because I've negotiated so many things in my life. I've always been, because of my kind of natural inclination towards aggressiveness, and I'm not afraid to ask questions, and I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid to look stupid. Um, I've always been put in those situations like, well, Joe will talk to him. Let Joe go talk to him. That could be a difficult conversation. He'll do it.
Yeah.
Um, what I've learned is the best prepared person usually has the best outcome in those conversations. And so I want to be prepared for whatever is coming at me. And I know that makes it sound like I would be, I can't remember what number it was that was, we would never run out of cookies, but I am not that
hmm
way.
hmm
But like, I've taken Meyer Briggs multiple times, And it's funny because the first letter is the only one that changes for me. I am either INTJ or ENTJ, but my motivation is kind of split right down the middle. Sometimes I get a lot of energy from external things, and
Mhm.
sometimes I get a lot of motivation from internal things. Like I love being alone. I love
Mhm.
alone time. Like it doesn't bother me a bit. There, but people are like, well, there's no one around. I'm like, oh, can you imagine no one around? So nice. But I'm
Yeah.
not antisocial, but I do love
Right.
alone time. But I think it's important to understand what motivates you because then you can, like we were talking about, set your life up so that you get enough of that, that it
Mhm.
refills the tank and you can get after things, you know?
Well, and I just think that is so interesting because I was reading into, you wanting to collect information, and I'm
Mm,
reading into it how I do, right? I
sure.
love collecting information, but I collect information because I want to have it all. I like surplus, 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 right? And so I'm assuming that's what you were, but when you could describe your motivation for wanting information, it totally makes sense. It's different. But this is how we go through life, assuming everybody thinks like we do.
Yeah, it's funny because even as a kid, I would hear the phrase, you should treat other people the way you want to be treated. And I'm like, I don't think that's right. Because like every coach, including my dad, like I love my dad, but you know, like the evil little league coach that they have in the movies. That was my dad in real life. He was that way in real life. He got kicked out of like at least 10 games or tournaments or things, wait for people in the parking lot so he could fight him, that kind of stuff. And it never ever bothered me because I was so competitive. I didn't care. Like as long as I could still compete, whatever. My dad can do what he's going to do and he can get on me if I don't play well or whatever happens. It never deterred me because I just wanted to go back and compete some more.
Mhm.
But I did learn that like if I wanted to win, I needed other people to be good. So to help motivate them, I had to figure out what actually motivated them. And it wasn't what motivated me.
Mhm.
Because to me, it was like, hey, we could win if I lift more weights. Fine, I'll be in the weight room 6 days a week. We could win
Mhm.
if I'm willing to do sprints until I throw up. I'll do sprints till I throw up. That's fine with me as long as we win. But that's not what motivates most people. So you got to figure
Mhm.
out, some people it's, hey, the team is counting on you. Some people it's, hey, you're
Yeah.
really good. Some people, um, and so I think if you want to be successful as a leader, it's very important to understand the people around you, what motivates
Mhm.
them, so you
Yeah.
can tailor your approach to the people you need to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Do you know who Jimmy Johnson is, the football coach?
No.
Okay.
I'm guessing I should.
Oh no, you shouldn't. No big deal. I didn't know if you were a football fan or not. So he is no longer a coach, but he coached the University of Miami and then he coached the Dallas Cowboys and won a couple of championships there. And he's kind of a legendary football coach.
Okay.
And he had a degree in psychology. He played football, but he actually got a degree in psychology. And a lot of coaches will say, we have rules and everybody follows them. Jimmy Johnson did not. He cut a guy one time because the guy fell asleep at a meeting, and the guy wasn't a very good football player. He was low on the depth chart, so the team didn't count on him. And a reporter said, "What would you do if Troy Aikman, who was his quarterback, his star quarterback, fell asleep at a meeting?" And Jimmy Johnson said, "I'd give him a blanket and a pillow and wait for him to wake up." So he made no bones about the fact that
Yeah.
because this guy is so important, we're going to cater things to him because we need him to win. If you're one of
Yeah.
these guys, you better stay awake in meetings and pay attention because we don't need you if you're not gonna. But that guy
Right.
is so important. And you can say it's good or bad, right or wrong, but he was awful successful taking that approach from a leadership
Mm-hmm.
perspective, at least,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know? So,
No, that sounds like
it,
an amazing coach, right? I'm familiar with football. I have three sons that played, so
mm, yeah.
but I just follow them wherever they are.
Well, he quit coaching in the 90s too. I think the last place he coached was in Miami, and I think it was in the late 90s when he stepped away from the game. But he's kind of like the godfather of coaching now. All the coaches make pilgrimages to South Florida to go talk to him about football coaching. In your practice, do you focus on specific things or people? Is it couples therapy? Is it self-improvement? What do you do in your practice?
Mm, great question. I do see couples. Couples are hard. Sometimes it's a last ditch effort for them to try to just check it off sometimes. So I enjoy seeing couples that are just kind of want to spruce up a little bit. Maybe there's an issue they can't get over and they need some help just maneuvering through it. I see adults mostly, and I see most of my clients are very high functioning um, and just need to talk and get through some things. I've had clients that I've seen for, I don't know, 6 years that I've tried to graduate, and
Mm,
they just like having somebody in their pocket to talk about life with. But I try to graduate my clients. I'm not one of those that just wants somebody around all the time, and they need to do the work to get out of those places. And then I have a lot of clients that'll come back when they get a bump in the road and just go, I need some help getting through this and getting some different perspective. Yeah, so I see a lot of trauma. I would say, most people have trauma. It's pretty normal. And, anxiety and depression are sometimes side effects that come out of trauma. Dealing with that, I do a lot of narrative focus therapy, which is around story, and it's kind of expanding your story. So, this is the story you're telling yourself from this incident, what else was going on, and how do you become the resourcer for your story to be able to move on. Um, so I feel like we have the resources in us to be resilient and keep moving, and helping people get there is huge. A lot of basic things I start with are talking about being a whole person, and that includes your emotions. And so stopping several times in the day to recognize, what am I feeling right now? A lot of times we just think about life, but we don't actually experience it. And I think that's a big part of being human, and it brings a lot of color to our world. So.
mm. We talk a lot on the podcast about learning to reframe things.
Hmm.
Because right, life's going to kick you in the teeth every once in a while, whether
Hmm.
you want it to or not.
Hmm.
And we have found that successful people find a way to reframe those things. Like I got fired once in my life, and it was a crazy story. We won't get into it, but literally on the way home after I got walked into an office and unceremoniously dismissed on a Friday afternoon, I was driving home to tell my wife, "Hey, I got fired."
Yeah.
And I was like, this is actually going to wind up being one of the best things that ever happened to me. And it was odd to me that less than a half hour after it happened, I had that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but how do you coach people to learn to reframe things or find uh, the path out, I don't know
Hmm.
if positive is the right way to look at it because I don't
Hmm.
necessarily think it's positive, but to make it a way to think about it in a productive way, I guess is the best way to ask the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. And with the positive piece, I'm going to start with that, even though you tried to dismiss it. It was, we have this thing called the negative effect, and negative, again, for safety in our bodies, by our design, we remember negative events to prevent us from doing it again. And so with positive events, you have to actually sit in it and recognize, I need to remember this. They say like negative events are like Velcro, they stick to you. Positive events are like Teflon, they roll right off of you.
Mm,
Um, and so some of the simple questions are, what else can you imagine? Right? Because I'm going to automatically go to negative thoughts like this is the worst thing, and I'm going to go down this road, I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to die, all these things when I lose my job. But what else could you imagine? What else could be in that space? Very simple, right? Reframe. There's more, there's a bigger story here. The other one I do is I call it under further review, right? Taken from the sports world. Okay, so there's a call that's made, it gets challenged. The referee goes to the little camera and sees all the angles coming in. And so we're going to do that. What else under further review? What else is happening? How do we make the story bigger? So,
I love it. And I love the sports analogy. You're speaking my language.
right.
Is that because you're tailoring it towards me, trying to
No, I've got a lot of athletes over here, so I've been sitting in the bleachers most of my adult life.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Anyone with boys generally winds up in a lot of those situations
Yeah.
for sure. So, do you how did your kids react to the whole situation that you had to extricate yourself and them from? Do they still talk about it? Do they have thoughts on it? Have they had ill effects in their adult life from it? Have they had to deal with stuff?
Mm. Yes, and I would say, that's their story. So,
Sure. but you as a mom, you've done obviously anything and everything you can to help them in those situations.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say, the religious, there's so many people dealing with religious trauma. This system has really hurt a lot of people, not just the one that the small one I was a member of, but by and large, they're all over the place. And so, it is a lot of work of figuring out what do you actually believe and what's true and what's not true when somebody's put a God card on it. Um, and
Mm.
so, just I think the one thing I wanted to do coming out of it was make sure the kids could still see each other a lot and making sure that they were around each other and had each other for support. And so, whether they were in college or whatever it was, I was making sure that they could fly and see each other and stay connected that way.
Yeah, and that was really thank you for saying that. That was really the point of my question. I wasn't trying to pry about your kids. I was
Yeah.
actually thinking about it as from your perspective as a parent, what were
Mhm.
the steps you took? So
Mhm.
thank you for
Yeah.
answering better than I asked.
Yeah.
is a is a
You know,
is a
well,
better way to say it.
and then the pandemic naturally did it for us also because they all ended up coming home from college and everybody's like, "Oh, that must have been so wonderful to have all your kids at home again." And it was terrifying, right? Like we didn't know if we were going to have enough toilet paper.
Yeah, nobody did, right?
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like you talked about previously, the trick is to keep showing up. Like
Hmm.
just keep going, keep asking questions, keep having conversations,
Hmm.
keep checking in and seeing what you see. And when you come across something, then you got to deal with it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I would say Joe as the mom, and a lot of the way I parented and a lot of the things I did, I am complicit for, and I hurt my kids in a lot of ways. Um, being, a strict parent and not letting them watch Disney and the crazy things that the system taught, and I'm complicit in that. So there's been a lot of apologies and a lot of learning to trust again, for them.
Yep. Makes sense. Is there a particular thing? I don't know if thing's the right way to say it, but is there a particular issue or problem that you see the most in your professional settings? Like people come in with problem X or struggling with problem X more than anything else?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say most people are coming in with some sort of identity issues, um, like not knowing who they are, not knowing how to trust themselves, and working on what are their strengths and gifts, how do they show up, how do they feel most at home in their body and their work, um, a lot of discovery, and it's really fun.
It's fun for you to help them discover that, is what you're saying?
And it's fun for them to discover
Mm.
that. I mean, for instance, I see a lot of really, like I said, high functioning clients that are incredibly successful. And I'll start asking questions like, well, what do you think needs to happen there? And they'll lean into the camera and I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, I'm waiting for you to tell me the answer. Right. And so learning how to ask questions, what do they actually want instead of what has their family or the world told them, that how they need to show up or who they need to be. What's that quote? Who were you before the world told you who you needed to be?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's the fun work. That's the work I love doing.
that makes perfect sense. I understand that completely. And that's one of the challenges, at least one of the challenges I see in today's society is like if you look at what we're doing, like you're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, we're able to sit here and have a great conversation because of technology.
Hmm.
But like anything, like cortisol, let's just go back to our cortisol conversation.
Hmm.
Cortisol in the appropriate amount is really good for you.
Hmm.
Too much cortisol causes all sorts of problems in your body, right?
Hmm.
So it's the same thing with technology, in my opinion. And we look at the amount of kind of comparison that happens now with the various social media platforms. So I saw so and so's vacation on Facebook, or I saw so and so's wardrobe on Instagram, or I saw so and so's relationship on whatever, insert social media platform here.
Hmm.
And a lot of people compare themselves to those scenarios.
Hmm.
And I've always felt lucky because envy or jealousy is rarely an emotion that I feel. What I compare a lot is who I am now to either who I used to be or what I think I could be. And so I do a lot of self
Hmm.
comparison. What did I used to be and did I get better? And how much more upside do I have in a particular area or subject? Like if it's ballet, I've maxed out my ballet capabilities. You're not going to see me in a ballet anytime soon. However, I think I can get better at reading people. I think I can get better at relating to people. I think I can get better as a leader. And I still think I'm a pretty good leader right
Hmm.
now, but I think I've got a lot of upside
Hmm.
on that. So what I try to do is put myself in situations where I can kind of incrementally grow. And, I try to set my life up like that. Am I always successful? Fuck, no, I'm not always successful,
Hmm.
but I'm always trying.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that's the message we try to preach to people is just try again, man. Just try
Hmm.
again. And even
Hmm.
when you think you're at the zenith, try some more. You don't know.
Hmm.
You might have set the
Hmm.
bar too low. Maybe you can break through that barrier, that ceiling.
Well, that's the whole piece of changing your mind. I can try something and I can decide I want to try something else. I liken it to going to the store and getting a piece of clothing, leave the tags on, because if you don't like it, you can take it back and get something else, you know. Or
Mm,
I remember with one of my sons, he was on swim team and he they moved pools. Same team, same swimsuit, same goggles, new pool. He would not get in the water. And this is where I always have the questions about like, how do you get your kid in the water when they don't want to go in the water, right? And I think that gentle parenting would say, well, maybe they don't need to go in the water, right?
yeah.
So I'm
The
over there
70s,
going,
70s parenting would be shove them in. What are you talking to your kid
I
for?
know. And I'm over there going, come on, honey, get in the water. Same thing, same friends, same everything. Just get in the water. Come on. Well, I got the kids in the car. We got to go. Just get in. He's like, I'm not getting in, mom. And I'm like, come on. And then I was like, if you don't get in the water, I'm going to take you in the bathroom and jerk a knot in you, you know? And then finally it was, come on, honey, just get in the water. Can you just try? And he was like, hmm, okay, I can try. So I think I don't know what is so powerful about the word try, but there's something really powerful about it. I'm just going to try. It doesn't mean I have to excel at it. It doesn't mean I might fail. I'll just try. We'll see. It's very
Yeah, I
neutral.
love that. I use walking as the analogy, right? So none of us stood up and walked across the room. We pulled ourselves up and we looked around, did that for a couple of weeks, and then we would crawl and we would do that for a couple of months. And then we would stand up and sit down. We would stand up and fall down. We would stand up and try to take a step. At no point, at no point did anyone go to their kid and go, "Hey, I just don't think you're a walker. It's just not going to work for you. You're not very good at it. So maybe you should crawl and you'll just be a crawler. You can crawl around for the rest of your life." And as a kid, it seems so moronic to say something like that out loud, but we do it to ourselves all the time as an adult.
Mhm.
Like if you're
Mhm.
walking down the street and you toe pick, like the sidewalk's uneven and you trip on something, what's the first thing everyone does is looks around to see if anyone saw them.
Right.
Like oh, I'm so stupid. I can't even walk down the street. I'm not even chewing
Right.
gum. But we're so
Would
afraid
you
of
call
being
it toe pick?
so yeah. Yeah, so on a figure skate, the little blades, the serrated edge on the front, that's called a toe pick. And if you catch it when you're skating, you're going face down on the ice. That's just how. So yeah, we call it toe pick. The other thing we called it was sniper, because and if you ever wear baseball cleats, metal baseball cleats like professional baseball players wear, there's a cleat right on the front toe. And the fields that you play on typically are very level, but every once in a while they're not. And so if you're running or walking and you catch that front toe cleat on a hill or a bump, you'll go down just like a figure skater. And we would say in baseball, if it happened to someone that a sniper got them, sniper, sniper, sniper got rich. But anyhow, I just don't understand why people care so much what other people think about them. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And one of the things I talk about a lot is 100 years from now, we're all going to be dead. No one's
Mm.
going to remember any of this. So go to the
Mhm.
karaoke bar and sing. If that's what you want to do, go do it.
Right,
What's stopping you? A bunch of drunk idiots you don't know judging you? Who cares?
right.
Like
Yeah.
literally, who cares? And so I've taken to using Queen Elizabeth II now as an example. So she was on the throne for over 60 years. Almost everybody in the world knew who she was. She
Mhm.
lived one of the most consequential existences in human history. And without Googling it, tell me when she died. I bet you can't do it. I can't do it. I don't know. And tell me three things she did when she was alive. I bet you can't do it without Googling it. If no
Mm-mm.
one remembers that, if no one remembers her, you think they're going to give a shit about you? Why do you
Yeah.
care? Who cares?
Yeah.
You know?
So I want to ask you a question back though. So you're looking back, you're trying to get better than you were. And what is your critic like? Your inner voice?
So it's very funny you asked that because most people would wither under my inner voice because it's actually very negative. But
Yeah.
that motivates me. I like the challenge of it. Like,
Mm.
I'm not proud of this, but I have actually said out loud to people, "Well, you dumb son of a bitch." Like when someone does something stupid, I
Yeah.
used to say that to people because I would say it to myself. Like I
Mm.
would call myself a dumb son of a bitch. Like, you
Yeah.
moron, what are you doing, you dumb
Yeah.
son of a bitch? You're better than that. What do you quit fucking around and get after this? You can do it. What are you doing? So that's kind of my go-to inner voice, but I've always known that I was a weirdo. I know I'm way out here on the tail of the bell curve. I'm nowhere near the standard deviation. I'm
So it's
too
like
standard.
normal and
Yeah.
weird. Like it's the weird curve.
Yes, I'm way out on the weirdo curve. And I'm comfortable with it. Like I
Yeah.
think that's why it works for me. Is because it's never bothered me to be a contrarian. It's never bothered me to be out there. Now, it can cause you problems sometimes because that's what I tell people a lot. The only way you can be courageous is to be scared first. Because you can only be courageous when you're fearful.
Hmm.
I'm not afraid of a lot of things, and people think like I'm bragging or I'm trying to make myself sound better than other people when I say that. I don't mean that at all, because I wind up in a lot of really shitbag situations because I was too stupid to just walk past them and be afraid like a normal smart person would be, you know.
Wait, so what,
So
like for instance, what?
uh, let me see if I can think of a scenario. So um, there was a disagreement with people at work and everybody was just kind of allowing it to happen. And I inserted myself in the disagreement. It happened to be two people that were superior to me. And then I wound up kind of in a situation where like I was supposed to take sides and support this one and not support that one. Everybody else kept their mouth shut and was just like, look at this idiot. Look what he got himself into. A normal person would have been, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot
Yeah.
pole. No, thank you. Um, but those kind of things. Or we can do that. We can make that work. And then 2 weeks into it, you spend 1,000 of your own dollars on some side project that nobody else wanted to touch, and you're like, "Why did I volunteer for this? Why did I just say no like everybody else, or just ignore it?" Um, but I've also got some wins in my pocket that other people don't have because I was willing to take on kind of gnarly stuff. And in my career, I was kind of a Mr. Fix It because I could figure things out quickly and people knew I wasn't afraid of being in unknown situations. And
Mm.
so you could kind of drop me into something and I would, kind of like a cat, I figure out how to land on my feet and
Mm.
work my way around. So, but yeah, I don't know. Everybody's different. And my inner voice, my inner dialogue would not work for most people. That's why I don't tell them I don't tell them use my inner voice because I don't think they'd
So
like it.
your inner critic is motivating to you.
It is.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah. But what do you see most often from people? What would your recommendation be as a therapist?
Yeah, I would say that the critic, again, when we go back to this kindness place, the critic is a part of you, and it's always trying to keep you safe, but it always goes overboard, right? And so it'll say, you're so stupid, you can't do that. It's just trying to keep you from failing. So when you recognize that and just go, I hear you, whatever name you want to attribute to your critic, right? I hear you, and you can turn the volume down. Or thank you for trying to protect me, but you can go on vacation because I'm quite doing quite well over here. And I think it's this comparison thing. I think people are like, I've always hated myself, or I've hated my body, or, I've been told by my family for years and years and years that I'm no good. And so I just keep replaying that message. And so how do we, turn that volume down? So I think there are other exercises, when you go through the kind of inner wisdom, and it's this older version of yourself, and you ask, you kind of see what they look like and where they're living, and do they have wisdom for you, and knowing that that's also a resource you can draw on, of like, oh yeah, I'm peace and love, in the future, how do I be peace and love now? Right. I don't know,
Mm.
salty ginger, how are you peace and love?
Well, it's funny too, because like I said, I'm not touchy-feely in any way, shape, or form. However, I'm also not judgmental in any way, shape, or form. And so it's very easy for me to have conversations with a wide variety of people, and gather and learn a bunch of information. That's what I love about the podcast is I get to learn so much from talking to super bright people like yourself, like the other guests we've had on. And, Albert Einstein said, everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to look stupid. So you have to put it in context, like you had talked about context in the interpretations of the Bible. I think it's very
Mhm.
important
Mhm.
to understand that context. And that's one of the things I try to do as a leader is like we've talked about, okay, so figure out what motivates people and then figure out what their skill set is. And if you can make those things align so that they're in a
Yeah.
situation that's motivating to them and they get to use skills and abilities they're already good at, they're going to have a lot of fulfillment in their
Mhm.
work. And I actually have a personal example of this. I've told you I've coached a lot of things. And there was a kid that was the same age as my youngest son. And the kid was just like a coach's dream. He worked his ass off. He was smart. He was respectful. And his mom fucking hated me. She didn't regular hate me. She fucking hated me.
Is
I
there
didn't
a
like her
double
either.
for that?
Yeah. I didn't like her either. Um, but I give her a ton of credit because she recognized that I was a really good coach. And
Mhm.
she recognized that I was really good to all of the kids on my team, but her son got a ton from being on my team. Not even just about sports, but just about life. Work hard, commitment,
Mhm.
sacrifice, teamwork. She recognized all that. So she could see through her hatred for me personally and just my personality and my
Yeah.
attitude. And it was good for her son. And she was very organized. And so while I'm coaching, there's all the other stuff that goes with coaching, the fundraising. And this was a travel hockey team. So we had to book hotels and enter tournaments and fill out paperwork and all the other stuff. So, our kids started playing together when they were 7. And so we knew we were going to have 10 years together. And so I made her the team mom and I didn't have to worry about a goddamn thing after that. She made sure everybody paid their stuff. She made sure all the reservations were done. I like removed myself from it. People would say, "Well, I'm getting hassled on this. You got to talk to Donna. This is all Donna's. This is all Donna's
Gotta
stuff."
make sure the orange slices and the Capri Sun showed up.
Exactly. And she let me coach. She never ever once interfered, and she actually made sure her son was on my team because she knew it was so good for him. So I
Mhm.
give her a ton of credit for that because like she really did not like me.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough. I didn't need her to like me. It wasn't my job for people to like me. It's my job to
Mhm.
raise good young men, is the way I looked at
Yeah.
it. So I
Yeah.
think I did a good job of that. So
Well, and that's that place where if the coach isn't yelling at you, then you got to be nervous. They don't see you, right? They're not seeing you. I was
yeah,
like, to my kids, I was like, make sure the coach yells at you a little bit. That means they're trying to get you better.
yeah, you're going to be okay. And look, every coach I played, like my high school baseball coach, and on my high school baseball team, there was 4 of us that either played Division 1 college or professional baseball. So we were a pretty good baseball team. But our coach, who's deceased now, he actually spent 3 years in a military prison in Korea for killing a guy in a bar fight. That was my high school baseball coach.
Okay.
So he was, I say I'm not touchy feely. Gino was not touchy feely. I can tell you that right now. He used to carry around this little duffel bag, and we were like, Gino, what's in that duffel bag? He said, I got two tank tops and three pair of underwear and two packs of cigarettes. I could survive for 2 weeks in the wilderness with that bag. Like, okay, I believe you. Don't prove it.
Yeah.
Don't.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. So one of the things we do, we've had a great conversation, and you shared so much with the audience, but I like to turn it over to you to either talk about a subject that we have not talked about yet. Maybe I haven't asked the right questions; it hasn't surfaced, but I want to kind of give you the floor so you can say anything or present anything to the listeners. The floor is yours.
Wow. Okay.
You don't have to either. If you're good, you're
This,
good. That's okay.
yeah, I'm just trying to think
Yeah, we
what.
just don't want to disenfranchise people or miss something because I was too stupid to ask the right question. So,
No, I think that was great. Yeah, I'm honestly, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that quickly.
no, that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, well, look, really, really enjoyed our conversation, Michelle, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences, sharing your wisdom. I just want to reiterate to the audience, you've got a person here who went through some really hard and difficult things personally and has education, training, and decades of experience, not only helping herself through these things, but others through these things. So there's a ton of valuable information that Michelle shared with us today. Hopefully, you were able to catch it. Probably worth going back to the episode again and taking notes if you did not. But just really appreciate you coming on, Michelle. Congratulations on
Thank you.
rebuilding your life and your success on your book and your practice and your coaching business. And again, we will leave in the show notes links to all of those. So if you want to get in touch with Michelle, and remember, she said her coaching business is virtual, so it doesn't matter where you are. You could
Mm,
seek her help and her advice, and all it takes is a Zoom link. So if you want to talk to her, we'll show you how to get in touch with her. So
yep.
thank you so much. It's a Friday
Yeah.
night. I hope you have a great weekend, and really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much. It was really fun being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay.
Okay, guys, like we said, we expected Michelle to kill it, and she did. What a great conversation. Tons of really practical, valuable advice and direction that came out of that episode. She talked about the challenges that she had to extricate herself from in her marriage in a difficult, kind of cultish, religious type situation. Talked about starting over, talked about building her business, talked about how to manage thought processes around different things. So, just a ton of valuable information. We cannot thank Michelle enough for coming on and spending time with us on the show. And like we said, links to her coaching business, links to her book, and links to book her as a speaker will all be in the show notes as well. So James puts it up over here every day. Don't forget to head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. We've got all the podcast episodes available there. We've got links to all our social media accounts there. We've got a newsletter that we publish every weekday. You can subscribe to there. And please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you consume it on. Very helpful for us if you're able to do that. One more thank you to Michelle. She just did a great job as a guest. Really happy to have her on. Really glad you guys got a chance to catch all that. You're going to keep getting awesome episodes like this from us at Salty Ginger Talk. So make sure you don't miss any of them. We will see you on the next one.